Hey everybody, Jake here. Just a quick note. In this episode, we mentioned childrensbookpro.com. It's a course that we are launching this week, actually, the week this episode drops. And I just want you to go check out childrensbookpro.com to see if this is something for you. If you're wanting to illustrate children's books professionally, this is the most comprehensive illustration course on the internet, 10 weeks long. And we've just, from everybody who's taken it last year, we've gotten such positive feedback for it. So I just want to let you know about that. I'm not going to talk about it. We do talk about it later in the episode, but I just wanted to start this episode letting you know about it so that this didn't get lost in the noise to go to childrensbookpro.com. All right, let's get right into it. Hello, everybody, and welcome to 3 Point Perspective, the podcast about illustration, how to do it, how to make a living at it, and how to make an impact in the world with your art. I'm Jake Parker.
I'm Lee White.
And I'm Will Terry, and all three of us are professional illustrators. We've all illustrated for all the major publications in the business. We've all taught illustration at different art schools, university art schools, and together we've published somewhere around 75 children's books.
That is correct. Each week we take questions from you guys that you can send in if you have other questions and ask us. We try to answer them as best we can. Sometimes we argue, sometimes we agree, but every time you're going to learn something brand spanking new.
Brand spanking new. All right. So let's really get down to business here. This is going to be an interesting episode, unlike an episode we've done in a while, in which we do kind of a deep dive. We're not answering questions. We're essentially want to answer the one question: where do I fit in the children's book landscape, right? And so, Will, this is sort of your show. We're just going to follow your lead because this is based off of a YouTube series that he made. If you go on Will's YouTube channel, there's a list of 7 videos where he kind of breaks this down, and we're gonna talk about that here, kind of get a 3-point perspective on it. But yeah, what's the reason for this? Why even try to answer this question? Because this had to start somewhere.
Well, first off, I have to say this has been my life's dream, where both of you are here, kind of at my beck and call.
Yeah,
so
tell us, Will Terry. Tell us what to do.
How do we do what you do, and what you think?
Kind of
about
feeling
that?
A little bit important today, so I'm gonna just kind of
every dog has his day.
Every clock is right, at least once a day.
This is going to be the longest podcast we've ever done.
Jeez. All right.
Okay, so here's what happened. Here's what's been happening. As many of our people you guys that are listening, we're all illustrators for the most part. Most of us are. And a lot of us are children's book illustrators. And one thing that we've come to experience is that when someone finds out that we illustrate children's books, they immediately, it's like a word vomit. They can't help it. They just go, blah, will you illustrate my book? Without thinking, without understanding, having any understanding of what we do. And it's always an somewhat awkward conversation, because you're in this position of having to educate this person who they've just found out you're an illustrator, so they can't possibly know what your style looks like, right? Mm-hmm. And they don't know if you're good. You're just, anybody will do, right? Like it makes us feel like, there's a leak in their pipe, and they just say, "Oh, you're a plumber. Can you come over and fix it?" And not to knock plumbers at all, but pretty much I would guess that residential plumbers can all pretty much handle the same tasks and do it at about the same time and charge about the same amount of money. And sure, there are great plumbers and there are bad, crappy ones, pun intended. But basically, for some reason, I would say that most people who don't know anything about illustration, they think that we're all interchangeable, they must, because they just say, oh, well, will you illustrate my book? So I made a video series for my YouTube channel about, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. And it was called 7 Reasons Why I Cannot Illustrate Your Children's Book. And it went through, you know, and I was having these conversations where like, so what kind of, you know, what kind of book do you have? Well, you'll love my story. And anyway, we get into it, and it's not a story that I would want to illustrate, but also they have no idea how much illustrators need to make to pay the bills. So they think that $500 is just a huge amount of money, whereas they don't realize that I would imagine that for most of us, it would take us 3 to 4 months to illustrate a book. And
that's the best case scenario.
Yeah. So if you take that into consideration and you say, well, you know, a low amount of money to make in a month is a couple $1,000 in a month, then you'd need at least $6,000 to $8,000 to pay someone poorly to do a children's book. You know what I mean?
Right.
And they don't have anywhere near that amount of money.
I'm wondering too if it's like they've seen some pretty crappy children's books, like books that were phoned in, you know, simple line style, and even simple books aren't phoned in. You know, there's a deception to it, but there's a range, there's a spectrum of books from really advanced illustration to very simple illustration, and really crappy detailed advanced illustration and very crappy simple illustration.
Right.
And you don't know what they've seen and what they think illustration is. But I like that point of view. Like, hiring an illustrator isn't like having someone come in and fix your toilet. It's more like, you know, getting a group of, you know, contractor together to like do an add-on on your house, or to finish out the basement, or to, you know, like, it's a big project.
It's a big project.
Something, you're creating something.
That's right. And it's a creative project. And so they just don't know what they don't know, you know? And so I created this video, 7 Reasons Why I Won't Illustrate Your Children's Book. And I went through things like, for instance, I don't know if you're planning to hire a graphic designer. Do you even know how important good graphic design is in a children's book, you know, and how vital that is to making a good book? I don't know if you are planning to use a vanity press, or if you're planning to go to call up a printer and say, hey, I want to make a children's book. And, you know, I don't know if they know how much it costs. So I don't know if they had an idea, like they've poorly written this book. I don't know how good the book is. And I don't know if they have enough money to actually pay for printing. I don't know if they want a few books for their grandkids, or if they want a few thousand books to sell on Amazon. I don't know if they're going to hire an editor.
Or actually, where they're actually going to sell the book. That's always my question.
Where they're going to sell it.
Like, you got all these books. Okay. Making a book's actually pretty easy if you got enough money to do it.
Right.
It's where you're going to sell it, you know, and a lot of people have no answer for that. They haven't even thought about that part.
And they don't realize what opportunity costs they're asking me to give up to work for them, and to not work for a major publisher that I've worked for in the past, you know. They
just
don't
so you
know.
guys know, let's go back just 1 second. Opportunity cost, we talk about it all the time, but just to refresh you guys, if may not have heard of it, it's a really important term. Opportunity cost is when you say yes to one thing, that means you're saying no to everything else. So you got to be careful with that, because that is a very, very real cost. When you do something that pays low, doesn't help your career, you're now saying no to making new portfolio pieces that could actually help your career, writing your own book or doing a book for a real publisher. That's
right. And they don't know that when you work for an actual, you know, children's book publisher, that there's a royalty deal involved, usually for most books. And so not only are you getting a higher advance than they can offer, but then you're also setting yourself up for the potential of getting royalties. You know, you have a contract that you're working with that says, I'm going to do this and you're going to do that, and you're responsible for this and I'm responsible for that. And so it really is this weird, awkward conversation. So I made that video. I started sending it out. I made it to send it to people. I made it so that when people would say, "Will you illustrate my book?" I'd say, "Well, watch this video first," kind of a thing. Mm-hmm. So I would get either asked in person or I would get an email, and then they would say, I'd send them the video, and then their response was, "You could have just said no," and it was like a 30 or 40-minute video. And I put a lot of thought and effort into it. And I thought they would be like, "Oh, I had no idea." This was my, my stupid fantasy was they would go, "Now I know."
Right.
I know the errors in my ways. And I am really serious though. And here's all the things that I've thought of to make this a good project. And here's why I think you'll like working on this project. I have X amount of dollars. I plan to use this graphic designer. I plan to use this editor. I plan to use this printer. I've researched the costs, and this is how I'm going to pay for it all. And of course, that's never happened. I've never had anybody do that. Right. But this new series of videos that I just launched this week, which would be the second week of February in 2022, is a little more efficient, and it's from a different perspective. Instead of the negative of "this is why I won't illustrate your children's book," it's basically and actually, Jake, you came up with the title that I ended up using for that, which is "Where do you fit into the children's book landscape?" which I thought was a great title for it.
Yeah,
and
thank you, Will.
Yeah, so I got to give you credit on that.
Well, you're the one who made such good, videos and had such a great idea. So credit to you.
I'm getting no credit here for I need credit for something.
Who's that? Oh, Lee. Hey, Lee.
So the first video, there's 7 videos, but the first one is basically an introductory video, and it basically introduces the series, and then it says, in there I say, if you're an author, right? Mm-hmm. And then under that, it's like, who wants to publish children's books for your kids and grandkids and family, and you need 500 copies or less, then go to video 2. Okay. And then if you want to publish children's books to sell on social media, Amazon, maybe even do a Kickstarter, so you're looking for maybe to sell 5,000 to 2,000 copies or more, go to video 3, and so on and so forth. So that's basically how it's set up. And then the last video is I want to hire an illustrator, or I want to learn. I'm an author and I want to learn how to hire an illustrator. And that's probably the most important video in the whole series, because it's basically everything that I think. And I would love to get your feedback, those of you who are listening, either on our YouTube channel or on the podcast, or even on the actual videos that I uploaded on YouTube, which, by the way, I've invited illustrators to use these to send out. If you get asked to illustrate someone's book, that's really the purpose of it, is you can then send them that first video. There's a playlist of 7 videos, and they can send it to someone, and they don't have to spend time watching an hour and a half of content. They can just watch the introductory video and then the video that gives them specific information on how to, if they want to, for instance, video 4 is, I'm an author and I want to get my books published by an established publisher like Simon Schuster, Scholastic, or HarperCollins. Click on video 4, right? So, I don't know what you guys want to talk about, but to me, video. Oh,
go ahead.
Video 7 to me is where I put it's by far the longest one, and I think it would be the most interesting to the audience that's listening.
Can you just run down 1 to 7 what the different videos are, and then we could talk about 7.
So the first one is the intro. The second one is, you want to publish, I'll just make it quick. You want to publish children's books for your family.
So that person is like amateur. It's a story that grandma's told, and let's just make a book for like family,
for family,
for family history or something like that.
Yeah. The third video is basically people who have authored a book, and maybe it's a niche book, and a typical traditional publisher might not be interested in picking it up, but still could sell quite a few copies. And like I said, you could launch a Kickstarter with it or sell it on Amazon or something like that.
So that would be like, I've got an idea for people who raise chinchillas, and this is a book for like chinchilla raising people.
Yeah, or any children's book that the general traditional publishers just aren't interested in for whatever reason. It could be a very specific book on an illness that kids get.
Oh, like the one you did for the hospital.
Yeah, exactly. For Merck. Yeah. So that's video number 3. Number 4 is I want to make writing my career, and I want to write for big publishers. Number 5 is I want to learn how to illustrate the stories that I've written. So it's an author wanting to learn how to also illustrate their own books. Video number 6 is I'm an artist who wants to learn how to illustrate children's books. So not an author, just an artist. And then what was interesting is in one of the comments on the video that I read yesterday was someone saying, you missed a video. You should have done what I'm interested in is I'm an illustrator who wants to find an author, which, and my response on that one was, the best way to do that is to really just have a really good online presence have really good artwork, a good online presence.
Get a rep too.
Yeah, and get a rep, and then the authors will find you. You're right, either through a rep or they'll directly contact you because they're out there and they're looking. And then again, video 7 is I'm an author and I want to learn how to hire an illustrator.
And was there I'm an author and I want to learn how to illustrate? Which one was that?
That is video number 5.
5. Okay.
Yeah. That's
okay.
5. Yeah. So basically there, like in video number 2, I'm mostly talking about like, look, and that's I want to publish for my family. What you really want to do probably is go to a vanity press, right? It's a one-stop shop where they handle all the writing, all the editing. They'll even hire an illustrator for you. They'll do the graphic design, but there's some cautions that I put in there. Everything will be done poorly.
And it'll be expensive too, right? I mean, relatively to what you get.
Yes. Your per book costs could be quite high, but cheaper than and more efficient than printing 1,000 books. Like, let's say you wanted 50 books. I don't really know how much they would cost per book, but I could see them costing $20 or $30 a book even. But that's still cheaper than printing 1,000 books with a traditional publisher. Right.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe they're only $10, $15 a book. But that would be my advice. And I think a lot of people fall into that category. Or they think that because they found you as the illustrator, that in some magical way you will be their liaison or segue into getting a book published and put in the bookstores. Because I
get that a lot.
I don't know. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, and then like, yeah, we're not magical. We can't
get people and put people in touch with our editors and art directors. I get that question a lot. Hey, can you just give me the name?
Yeah.
Or send an email out with both of us CC'd on it, that kind of thing. I'm not doing that.
Right. So that's video number 2. Video number 3 is, I talk about, okay, what are the costs of, if you're going to do this on your own and you're going to go to a printer and you want to hire the illustrator, you're going to also really need to hire an editor, because editing for children's books is different than just grammar. There's a lot of considerations for moving the story along in a quick, in only 32 pages, word counts, the kinds of words that you would actually use in a children's book, adult language versus, more, I don't know. There's just things that children's book editors know that most, I would imagine most editors for adult editorial content wouldn't. So hiring somebody that really knows what they're doing, and hiring a good graphic designer, and then having a good marketing plan. And I discussed the fees involved and how much you could actually end up paying.
Did you talk about coming up with content? So this is for somebody who's writing and illustrating their own book, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So did you talk about like cliche content? What would you say is the 3 most cliche stories that you guys hear from new illustrators?
There's monsters under the bed.
Monsters under the bed. That's number 1 for sure. If you have a monsters under the bed story, throw that one away and start on something else, because it never fails that's one of the first ones. Okay. What else?
A lost pet or a lost dog. Right?
Yep. That comes up a ton. Before I lose my train of thought, let me just add this one that I see a lot of adults writing and that kids do not care about. And so if you have this story, you got to throw it away. It's the kid who works too much and needs to play more. That's an adult concern. Kids do not have that problem.
No.
It's so funny. I've seen that story a bunch from adults. I'm like, you don't understand. Kids don't do this. This is not a problem for them.
Right. There's the story that I'll read. Go ahead. You have something, Jake?
Oh, then the other one is a stuffed animal comes to life or something like that.
The Chucky genre.
The one that sticks in my mind from a very famous author, like I'm talking like you walk through the bookstore and you've seen this author in the romance area, and I'm not going to name names because it's not my story. It came from Rick Walton, who's passed away, and he actually talked to her, and she had this manuscript that was really, really, really funny, because it was basically, as a grandmother, she decided to write a children's book. Now, she's a very, 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 very famous published novelist, right? But she took her stab at writing a children's book, and you could tell exactly what happened in her life. It was this kid, he's having a great day, he's playing in the backyard, everything's safe, and he's doing good things back there, and he swings on the swing, and he plays with the ball, and then he goes in the front yard, and the ball goes out in the street, and he runs out in the street, and the cars screech and squeal and everything, and then she goes into this lecture of you should never go out into the street, and like, and I mean, I've read this manuscript, and it is hilarious. And kids that go out in streets can die. And if they die, they'll never be alive again. And then grandma can't ever have them again. And it was like, this cautionary tale for her grandchild or something. And anyway, so yeah, there's definitely things that work in a children's book and things that just don't. And
like you could do that story so many different ways,
right, without it being a lecture. Yeah,
right.
That's a big thing, is the parents try to almost over lecture or kind of tell kids how to live their life. Right. It's a little heavy handed when you see those,
right?
But I could see it being if you wanted, if that was sort of the theme, you would go down, like I could see a book being published, an actually like legitimate book where it was like so far removed from that, but yet the theme was still there. Like,
well, David Shannon, A Bad Case of Stripes.
Yeah.
is a book
Or No,
exactly
David.
like that. Super creative
Yeah.
way of telling people, hey, it's okay to eat healthy foods, or like eat the good foods too, not just the desserts. But it's done in such a good way that it's an interesting story. It's fun to read.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm just kind of hitting the highlights from each one of these, but basically that's video number 3 is the costs and the considerations for making your own book. 4 is I want to get published by a national publisher, and I talk a lot about how to submit your writing and how to basically find an agent, and I talk a little bit about the history of publishing recently, where in 2008, 9, 10, a lot of editors were laid off at the big publishing houses because we were going through this, real economic downturn. And that even as we kind of came out of that, they didn't really replace them all. They're really relying on agents to do a lot of the sifting through manuscripts. So instead of sending your manuscript directly to a publisher that probably won't read it, probably doesn't have, if it's unsolicited, if they didn't ask you to send it in, they probably don't have time to read it. It goes in what they call the slush pile. That they will often, because they have relationships with agents, they will often call up an agent and say, hey, do you have a book on bullying? We need it. We're hoping that the protagonist is a girl, or a boy, or whatever their specifications are, but they will actually look for specific content, and they will use the knowledge and expertise of the agents to find manuscripts. So the gatekeeping has shifted more towards agents than ever before. So having an agent is almost, it's paramount. I would imagine right now. That's what I've been told by editors.
Well, you can understand why too. Is that if an agent is submitting something, that means the artist has been vetted. That they're not just going to be a waste of time. They obviously know how to work. They're making it their career. It's not just somebody who just might have done a pretty piece of artwork once or twice. So it saves editors and art directors a massive amount of time when they're getting, thousands of submissions. There has to be one way to cut that submission pile in half, and that's the way.
So the question then comes, how do I get an agent?
It's the same process, though. I get that question a lot, though. It's the same process as getting a publisher. The work has to be the exact same level. Agents can be super picky. The one difference, though, between an agent and a publisher in terms of submissions is sometimes you can be a little bit more raw, and they will see the natural talent and be willing to kind of foster you along and help you get settled, figure out the artwork and whatever. Publisher will not do that.
Right. It used to be, you could probably, you have to be a certain level with the publisher, but there are publishers that like to foster a long-term relationship with an illustrator. We just talked to Samantha Cotterill. That episode will drop in the future, but she's on book 4 or 5 or 6 with the same publisher. And,
do you guys have that relationship? Because I haven't found that to be true in my career, but I know other people have.
For a series, hey, this book did well, let's do another book like this, that sort of thing. But yeah, I haven't particularly found that as well too. And I even noticed big names like Dan Santat, I think he comes back to Roaring Brook for his writer illustrator ones, but then he's illustrating for any publisher who has a good story with an author. And who's the guy that was publishing that published Creepy Characters?
Peter Brown,
right?
Yeah.
So I noticed his books are all from Little Brown, right? So there's illustrators out there who get there, but you're not going to get there until you've proven yourself on some level. And so there's this ladder, right, where it's put together a portfolio of work, pitch it to agents. Agents take it to publishers. Publishers fill you out. Like, how do we want to, do we like working for you? And a book maybe does really successful with one. Let's do this again. So it's really like long-term thinking, but.
Well, and with that long-term thinking, a big problem, and one of the, as I was making this video series, I had my phone and I would just put bullet points in my notes to just, when an idea would pop in of like, oh yeah, that's right. They don't know this. They don't know that. One of the common things that happens when people go to SCBWI conferences, they're first time, they're a wannabe first time author, right? And we've talked about this before on this podcast. They've written one story, right?
Yeah.
And they want to be discovered, and they want to be represented perhaps by an agent. And so they're hopeful to get into the business, but they've only sort of written one story. And in video 4, I talk about that, and I say, that there's no agent or publisher that's going to want to publish you if you don't have a body of work, because even if it's a success, they want your next book.
Right.
But if you're not working on your next book, or, and so there's just this thing where, if you, and that's why video 4 is I want to make a career out of writing. And it's if you have one book, you're not going to be interesting to an agent.
Well, just look at, like, name me one person who has done I won't say, give me a list of people who have written one book, had it be successful enough that it could, give them whatever they need to have a career, and tell me how that, tell me that list of people.
J.K. Rowling.
J.K. Rowling. It's on one hand. It's it really is not a normal thing to do. Whereas,
that you've hidden your genius, and you've just unleashed it all in one book.
Right. And even I want to say Harper Lee, who did To Kill a Mockingbird, she was rolling with Truman Capote. She was rolling with these
speculation
writers.
Is that Truman Capote wrote it. I mean, to me, that's way more plausible.
Yeah, I have no horse in that race, and I haven't researched it, but still, yeah. So yeah, maybe you're hanging out with really talented authors that can write your stuff for you. That's another viable option for you as a creator. I'm just kidding. You guys are like, yeah, just
starting to consider it like, yeah, I guess.
Yeah, why didn't I?
If I wanted to be that one hit wonder, and that was okay, I would just write a book called Skull Chaser.
Well, now that would be stealing.
Really? Because I don't know of a Skull Chaser that's been published.
Oh, that's true.
You're hurting my feelings.
That is true. There is no Skull Chaser. If I go to Amazon, there is no Skull Chaser.
Yet. And hopefully someone listening to this a year from now is like, these guys don't know what they're talking about. I can order Skull Chaser right here. Okay, so
I can only hope.
Right. So let's get down to brass tacks. You are a person who has some illustrating chops, or at least a strong desire to illustrate. How are you going to get into this? How are you going to make this a viable career for you? What are your steps?
So you're talking about video number 6, right? So I'm an artist, and I want to learn how to illustrate children's books and work for major publishers. And so, first you have to have great work. How do you get there? You either went to a good school, good art school, or you took lessons online, like our school, SVSLearn.com, or you are self-taught, which is, you're basically self-taught, right, Jake?
Yeah, I mean, that's such a loaded term. It's not like I was on an island with
Right.
charcoal and paper and just was like, I've discovered perspective. Everybody, I created perspective. No. But
Yep.
but formal education, I learned a lot on the job and from other artists and stuff like that.
It's a long pursuit to pick up the chops that you need, or the portfolio that you need to be able to attract an art director to risk the tens and tens of thousands of dollars it takes to produce a children's book when you factor in all of their operational costs at the publisher, the printing costs, the distribution costs, the illustrator costs, the author costs, the everything. And so you are basically, you have to get your portfolio in a space where you can have them say, we can't afford not to use this illustrator. This is the perfect illustrator for the job. And then going to conferences like SEBWI, writing for young readers, conferences like that, where you start to immerse yourself in the world and you start to pick up on things that you put in your tool bag of things that you will want to do to make your artwork fit in, and then you seek out an agent. Perhaps it's not 100% necessary, or an agent or a rep for your art. And this might be a good time to plug Children's Book Pro, because to toot our own horn, the three of us came up with what I'm calling the most comprehensive children's book illustration class in the world, brick and mortar or online. We basically, it's a 10-week course, but you can do it in 10 weeks, but if you're really trying to hone your craft, you'll go through it multiple times,
Yeah.
And with multiple projects, you don't have to go through the whole thing each time, but you have to basically continue working on your portfolio using all the principles that we teach in that class.
That the 10-week course there, it is such, this is the thing I wish that I had, starting out, because you're learning from three different, working illustrators, not just three illustrators who worked on children's books like 10 years ago, and now they're coming out of retirement to make a class. Not three different illustrators who can't get, work doing illustration. It's current working illustrators who currently have, either have just published a book or are publishing books, and who know what these steps are to creating a children's book. Are you going to, one of the things that people do oftentimes is they're like, okay, I've got this idea. I want to illustrate this children's book. Okay, let's do page number 1. Let's start drawing this illustration. And it's such a awkward way to go about doing a children's book. You got to have a plan. You've got to break down, what is the theme of the children's book, and what visually can you do to express that theme. What do your characters look like, and how do your characters compare and contrast to each other? And this course, we break all of that down. I think one of the most valuable things in it is the map, where we show start to finish all 100 points of 100 steps from, you've got an illustration, you land, even before you land the job, to the book getting published, right? And everything in between, but also the children's book breakdown, where you read the manuscript and you start breaking it down. Okay, what do I want the first image to be? What do I want the closing image to be? What time period does it take place? What location? What's the weather like? Because all those play into factor. If you have, you can use sunshine or clouds or rain to mirror or contrast what your character's feeling. All of these things play into it. You're not just illustrating, you're just not just drawing a picture. You're telling a story with the art. And I think that's why the people who have taken this are like, oh my gosh, you guys have completely opened me up to stuff I didn't know was required or even possible with illustration.
It was so fun making that class. And it's so
it wasn't
rewarding
intentional that we
through
were going to go that deep either in making that class. But once we got into it and started looking around, there's not really much for people. There's not much out there for people to use who want to be narrative illustrators in terms of taking a class. There's just, most of the time they go in, like some of the other schools that we saw, it'd be like a 2-hour class on being a children's book illustrator, like cumulative amount of time they're talking about it. Okay, go illustrate your book after 2 hours. And so,
or like there might be a thing on Skillshare where it's like, a 6-hour thing.
Right.
Here's my
Create a
process
character,
of how I made my children's book. That's how they made their children's book. Like, it's like sharing a recipe for making one kind of cookie, as opposed to here's how fats work, here's how heat works, here's how salts, here's how oils
so you can
work.
design your own cookie.
We talk about pacing, like how do you, I've never seen this topic in a children's book class, but how do you speed up, like if you want the reader to, or the viewer to go through a certain section fast, or to make the pace seem more hectic, or more's on the line, or how do you slow down a pace if you want people to slow down and pay attention to an illustration that might be a more somber moment or a sad moment. Those are not in normal books. You know what I mean? How to change the pace, because that's part of it, is like when you're reading one of my books, I want you to slow down on this image. I want this image to seem fast, like you're racing. I want you to go through these things with my character. And we talk about that. And then like Will and Jake do it in a totally different way than I do. And so we had to it was just super cool to film all that stuff, because I thought, well, this is the way to do it. And then Jake does the same thing, but a totally different way. And then Will does the same thing. And that's where we started to really see like, oh man, this is pretty big. And that's why we can say that it's the best one out there. If anybody finds a better class on children's book illustration, I challenge you to find it.
We want to know about it. But so far, we've been saying this for quite a while, and we haven't found one bigger. So I want to spend time, the remaining time, unless you guys have anything more, on the last video, which is number 7, which took the longest. This is the most information they put out there, but it's basically like everyone tries to hire us the wrong way. I mean, I'm talking about amateur authors, and so. One of the things I started with in that video, I won't go through all this, but one of the things was I said, when I get an email from an author saying, hey, I think you're perfect for my book, will you illustrate my book? I said, here are the red flags that are going up. This is what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid of you. I'm afraid of you because you're unproven, and I don't know if you can make a great book. I don't know if you'll pay me in the end, right? You're in another state, it's that classic thing of artwork money, handing it off, Right. I don't think that you'll have a contract to work with, or even know what would be in a typical publishing artist publisher agreement. I worry that you will make art directing decisions without knowing how to art direct. For instance, you'll want me to make the kids look like your grandkids. And that's happened a bunch of times to me. Right. I worry that you won't see the project through and that my work will never be printed. I worry that you don't have a way to distribute the book when finished. I worry that you won't work with a graphic designer, that you won't have it properly edited, that all my time will be wasted on a project that no one will see, and that I can't put in my portfolio because you've art directed it to death. You've made decisions that I just can't wait to get through it. And then I talk a lot about how you may be successful. And I'm gonna read this letter that I wrote to I gave a sample letter, and I said, you may be successful in getting a young out of the gates illustrator to say yes to really bad terms. But what you're going to get is an illustrator who's not happy and who wishes that they had said no to the project and who might even quit in the middle of it. Right. Mm-hmm. Now, I worked with someone one time who, actually, I didn't work with this person. I know this person who hired 2 illustrators to work on her book. Because the first one quit, and then the second one quit. And she's telling me, I can't figure out why they quit. This is actually one of the reasons why I made this video series as well.
Yeah.
And she may watch this, She probably won't listen to this podcast, but she'll know that I'm talking to her in that video series,
Yeah.
Because I talked about that in there. And she has literally no idea why they quit on her. Mm-hmm. Like, do illustrators she's asking me, do illustrators just quit sometimes? And I'm like, not if they're paid well enough and not if they have creative freedom,
Yeah.
And so it's one or both of those things. It's
right.
one or the other or both.
If I'm not going to have creative freedom, it better be really worth my time. If it's going to be a killer portfolio piece, then I can, justify not spending as much, not making as much money on it. Right. I think what you're asking here, Will, because this is not a problem that happens very much in other professions, but what I think you're asking here is just a pleading on behalf of all illustrators to treat this a little bit more professionally. To treat this profession with kind of the respect that comes with other professions, that you're not, just because you really enjoy it and you love doing it and you grew up doing it, doesn't mean that it's a hobby. It doesn't mean that it's like a thing you're doing for fun necessarily, but that it really is, a livelihood, a legitimate way to have a livelihood. And also you're creating culture. You're part of the conversation that's happening, and that's something that should be taken serious. And I guess a public service announcement to people wanting to help create culture, that it is something that needs to be done on a more professional and serious level. Like, think about the profession of architecture. Okay. I have this great idea for a house. It'd be such a cool, and it'd be the perfect thing for my family to live in. Listen, I've got the idea for the house. Can you just figure out, can you help me get it made? And they're going to be like, well, okay, yeah, we've got a house job here. Okay, here's my terms, my conditions, here's the contract. Let's draw this up. Let's, you don't just randomly ask someone you go to church with to help you build a house.
Right.
You go down the professional path. And I think we need to elevate illustration to that level in the minds of our society.
Yeah. Yeah,
I do want to add that we have gotten some feedback based on your example there, that, so we sometimes use general contractors and stuff as our example. And I saw some feedback on our forum at SVS that hey, my husband's a contractor and they get these questions all the time too. Hey, will you put in some free cabinets? So I do want to acknowledge that this actually does happen in other professions too. We should treat them professionally as well. Don't ask people to do stuff for free.
Right. Yeah, this was a big educational. I mean, that's what it really is. It's an educational effort, where people I think they think that if I were to poll some of these people, I'll bet you they would think that it takes us maybe a week to illustrate a book.
Well, with computers now, you hit the
button.
Make it cool key, on the keyboard, and boom, There's a program called Illustrator. Doesn't that do half the work for you?
I think there's another weird kind of misconception that and this is a really odd one. I'd need to really dive into it to figure out why they think this, but because you're enjoying yourself and you picked this career because you're good at something, that it doesn't equate to a value. Like our value isn't just like, hey, I just like drawing, and as long as I got something to draw, I'm happy. So I'll draw your book. You don't even need to pay me. I'm just happy because I'm drawing. And so you shouldn't be penalized because I like what I do. I shouldn't be penalized for it financially.
Yeah.
Right.
I actually have someone at church asked me if I would design the exterior of their video game cabinet that they made for like their, people will make arcade games like as a home project or whatever, and they'll put in, the screen and the game system inside there, and it's like a cool. I actually want to do that myself, but they're like, hey, we're saw your art. Do you think you'd be great for this? Would you be willing to like design the side and maybe make the family members like characters from video games, so, like make my son Mario and make me Donkey Kong and stuff like that. And that sounds like a really fun project, but I had to say no because I'm like, this would probably take me a couple weeks to do a good job on it, to make it look like a video game cabinet, like the exterior of it. And unless you're rolling in it more than, than your average like neighbor of mine, it's going to cost you, like, it's going to cost you more than like everything that you put into this thing so far, in order for me to justify the time working on it. And I felt bad because I keep thinking like, oh, maybe I should just do it for like, out of kindness and friendness, because it would be fun to do. But at the same time, it's the opportunity cost. So now I'm working on this game cabinet, and I've said no to like 2 Disney projects, in the meantime.
Yeah.
I just designed a house for a friend, and it took a lot more time than I thought it would. I even after all this time and us talking about, we don't do this stuff, I went ahead and I said yes to it. It took me forever to figure out how to do it. I just designed the floor plan, like how everything lays out, the walls and stuff, where all the rooms are.
Wow.
Oh my gosh. It was a lot. It was cool to do it, and I was glad. It's one of my best friends, so I don't mind it. But man, just be careful.
In that sense, in doing something like that, you'd rather do it almost for free. Because I did it for free. Yeah, you can't possibly charge what your time is worth.
You feel weird.
You feel weird
like charging.
Yeah. And then it messes with the relationship to some extent.
Be like, hey, buddy, can you like? I kind of need $2,000 for all the work that I put in. That's not going to go over well.
Right.
Boy. Well,
anyway, so the last thing I wanted to go through was this letter, and this is. In that last video, I go through like coaching, educating, like all the little things. Like, did you know that it takes illustrators about this amount of time? Did you know how royalties work? I give a little, and I advise them, like, don't pay royalties. Don't offer royalties to illustrators. You're not set up for it. You're not set up for the rest of your life to send them a statement every 6 months. My advice would be tell them how royalties work, but in this case, it's going to be a flat fee for these reasons, and you might have to pay a little more. But anyway, I gave them a sample letter, and this is actually in the show notes, in the description on the YouTube video, so it could be copied and pasted and modified. But I say, I am a first-time author. This is an author trying to hire an illustrator, right? So I am a first-time author, or second or third, or whatever you are, and I love your style. So you're going to hear notes from this whole podcast in here, right? I've been searching for an illustrator for the right one, and I think your work would be perfect for my story. I have researched how to work with an illustrator, and if we can work out an agreement, I will use a contract that works for both of us. I'm not an art director, but I'll be hiring a graphic designer. Pop up on my notification on my phone. There it goes again. Lee.
It's me.
He's texting you right now.
Yeah, what the heck?
You're texting us the floor plans to the...
I did, just so you can see. Stupid.
Keep going, Will.
I'm not an art director. You couldn't have planned that any better. I'm not an art director, but I'll be hiring a graphic designer. or working with a vanity press that will handle the graphic design work. I'll also hire an editor who understands how to edit specifically for children's picture books, or working with the vanity press. The only creative input I will give you is if I see that you might not have understood the story from looking at your sketches, or if you omitted items of storytelling necessary to visually tell the story. I will not try to get you to make the characters look like my grandkids. I mean, like, this is the letter that I want to read, right? If I'm ever going to consider working with someone on a self-published book. Mm-hmm. I understand that I am hiring you for your artistic interpretation of my story. I cannot offer you a royalty on each book because as an individual, I don't have the software and knowledge to pay out regular royalty payments, yada, yada, yada. I do have a budget to work with, and if it works for you, I can pay you 1/3 on completion of rough sketches, 1/3 on completion of final sketches, and 1/3 on completion and delivery of final artwork. And then here's optional. If you want to sign an NDA, I'll send you my manuscript for consideration. I didn't talk a lot about that, but for authors, a lot of them are really hesitant to send their story in, without, they don't even want to sometimes they're like, I don't even want to give the illustrator my story ever. And I'm like, they're going to kind of need it to illustrate the book, well, can I just tell them about what it's about? They're just so paranoid that someone's going to steal their book. Mm-hmm. Anyway, to finish it up, I hope you like my story and want to illustrate it. You can contact me and I suggested in here that they IM them, that they look for them on Instagram, and that Jake is about to dig into a piece of cake right now. If you're on YouTube, you can see this.
That's not fair.
It's totally not fair. But I would look for an illustrator on Instagram. They're all there. All the good illustrators are there. All the beginning, the good, mm-hmm. the fair, the good, the great, and the amazing illustrators. They're all there. Yeah. And I would IM them and this message, this letter, and then give them my email. And then I give advice that we don't have to go into here on paying them a flat fee. And, I say, and I'd like to get your guys' take on this. I suggested that, you can hire an illustrator for $1,000, but at that amount of money, you're probably going to run into problems where an illustrator said yes, but is going to give you substandard work because they just can't spend the time necessary at $1,000 to give you mm-hmm. what you actually really want. And that my minimum was about $3,000. And that is for, probably like a student, a really good graduating student, offer them $3,000, but have a budget of like $5,000 so that you can go up if they ask for more. Mm-hmm. What do you guys think as far as that?
It depends on the style that you're going to be doing it at, because you could easily, if it's a hour per drawing, then that's a good rate. If it's 2 hours per drawing, maybe that works. But if you're spending like 2 or 3 days or a week per illustration per spread, mm-hmm. That does not add up. You're better off, getting a fast food job. Right. I said you really should try to have a budget. I mean, if you really want a good children's book, having more is better. $7,000 or $10,000 is going to really make you're going to up the amount of illustrators that will, the quality level of illustrators that will say yes to a project like that. And
we'll add that if you're going to hire a student, it needs to be a little asterisk next to that. It needs to be a recent grad, because one thing that students have just across the board in terms of what I've seen as a teacher with so many students is that not understanding exactly how much time they have available to do something. So I've seen a lot of my students take on an outside project, like a author book or whatever, a video game concept design or whatever. And then they get jammed up because all their classes are requiring them to do all this work and they don't have time for the extracurricular project. But the recent grad is the optimum person if you can get them, because they don't have a ton of projects going and they don't have a ton of classes going.
How would you find a recent grad?
I would contact the schools in your area. If there is a school that's dedicated to illustration, has illustration as a major, they typically, there's always like a job resource person at a school, and they are dying to get illustrators jobs because typically they can't. It's always like graphic designers get those kind of jobs all the time. Like a firm will need a junior production person and then the staffing person from the college lines them up and they get a little check mark because they help that person get a job. That is their job, to help people get jobs. And the illustrators always bring down their numbers. So they'll be happy to hook you up with an illustrator because then they can check it off and look like they're doing better at their job.
Right. We have not created a resource with SVS or with Children's Book Pro, but I mean, we have some of the best people that might be interested in illustrating for other people.
Yeah, we should make a SVSLearn job board.
That is a fantastic idea.
Yeah. The hesitancy has been, you know, some people offer really bad. I mean, some people will say, you know, here's $1,000, and they'll get in there and they'll make all the mistakes, and and I don't want to have anything to do with helping put those two people together, you know.
There's some liability maybe.
So we need a buyer beware job board on SBS where it's like, this is here, but we need a really heavy disclaimer or something.
We need to make a thing called, instead of Fiverr, 5,000er. Every job base is $5,000.
Yeah, we're having a business meeting right now, but you guys can just listen in.
I love this idea. It actually works pretty well because some of the people that have gone through our program are amazing, and then they get repped and they go on to do all this commercial work, and we actually had them first. Like we could actually place them first.
Yeah, we should become agents. Percentage of every job.
We should be agents. That's all I'm saying is we should be agents at this point because we could spot the talent. Man, there's a couple people that have come through, especially some people that were in my book cover illustration class where when they turned in their first sketches, I was like, oh my gosh, you're better than I am already. Like I don't.
Yeah. And critique arena too. Like every critique arena we do, there's usually the winner is like ready to go.
For sure, pro level. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know,
that's true.
Yep.
All right.
So anyway, that's my videos. Yeah, that's my video series, and I hope it helps people out there to be able to send it out. And when they feel like someone needs a little education in this field.
Yeah. We mentioned earlier Children's Book Pro. So go to childrensbookpro.com to sign up for that course. We're running it again. Like at the time this episode drops, we are running it like right now. So this is a chance to get in on it. Otherwise, you're going to have to wait another 6 months or something.
When does this one come out?
This comes out next week.
Oh, wow. Quick.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
so we're
for
doing
the people listening, it came out today.
Yeah. But we've run Children's Book Pro. This will be the third time in over a year. So 2 or 3 times a year we do this.
Should we announce that we're actually taking on a few live students? That's the first time we've ever done that.
Yeah. So
no, we shouldn't announce that.
Well, whatever.
There's 5 people. We're taking 5 students each, me, Will, and Jake, to go through this program. We'll see how it goes. It's a test run to see if it's better instructed.
So go to Children's Book Pro, get on the email list there. You'll get emailed as soon as that link goes live for signing up for the class. Thank you for joining us today, everybody. 3 Point Perspective is brought to you by, or is made possible by SVSLearn.com, where becoming a great illustrator starts. And your hosts today have been Will Terry, Lee White, and I'm Jake Parker. You can find Will Terry at willterry.com and at willterryart on Instagram. You can find Lee White at leewhiteillustration.com and at leewhiteillo on Instagram. And you can find me at mrjakeparker.com and at jakeparker on Instagram. Podcast produced by Daniel 2. That's danieltu.co. Go find him there at daniel2.co. Special thanks to Master of Production David Bro, Keeper of the Curriculum Austin Shirtliff, Chief Operations Officer Lisa Fott, and a thank you to Lily Howell for our show notes. Now, go draw something.
Yeah. We've been getting through The Mandalorian, like almost all the way through. And fun. I like it. I like the, kind of, it's simple.
Wait until you come over to Boba
follow.
Fett.
No, I've heard some negative things there. But here's my biggest problem with it. That just is sad. Is I feel like I'm on the back lot. Like I'm, like I can just see. It's just cheaply made.
It looks like a set. In other words, is that what you're saying?
It just feels cheaply made
because it's not on location. You know that they have revolutionized, like special effects with that show. Like there's before The Mandalorian and there's after The Mandalorian.
It's like how to save a lot of money and making it look pretty good.
Yeah, I gotta say they have to stay away from those characters playing instruments at the bar. Those are not the greatest characters. Especially that elephant-looking thing.
Well, those types of things that appeals to like diehard Star Wars
4-year-olds. I remember it from the original Star Wars. I mean, I remember the Creature Canteen, but the elephant, like once they shoot the hand over to the band, you're just like, wow.
Max
I mean,
Rebo,
it's almost like
the blue
Jim.
Elephant guy.
What's his name?
Max Rebo. You don't know the names of the band members from the Cantina? He's actually from Jabba's Palace, but anyways, we're not splitting hairs.
He looks so. I expect Jim Henson to walk out any second when he's there. Like he looks like a Muppet.
Okay, don't worry about that.
I can't get past it.
The reason you're watching it though is because it's compelling on some level, right, Will?
Yeah.
I will say this: if this goes into our live banter, and Will hasn't seen The Mandalorian, this is just a little side note. Ready for his
no, he hasn't seen Book of Boba Fett.
I haven't seen. Boba Fett.
Sorry, Boba Fett. That's what I meant. That me and Jake had this conversation last week. They wrote Boba Fett basically off of the Boba Fett show. Like the last 2 episodes do not contain Boba Fett.
So I've had some more thoughts about that. And then we should probably get into the podcast.
Yeah, but before you say that, I got to say this.
Yeah. Okay.
Werner Herzog being a villain, who saw that coming? I mean, I know he's been a villain in other movies, but
who saw that?
How do you go from
Star Wars?
How do you go from documentaries to I'm this really scary villain?
Because he's got an amazing voice and presence. And
who is this?
Werner Herzog.
Yeah.
Show me the child. However he talks. I don't know.
That was Jake, everybody, just to let you know who's listening.
You could also hear him say...
Here's what I think's going on at Lucasfilm. Okay, you've got the guys, the creator dudes who are making this, Dave Filoni and what's his name? Happy from Iron Man. Why can't I remember his name? The actor who plays Happy in Iron Man.
Yeah, I
don't know who that is.
Favreau. Jon Favreau.
Yeah.
Okay. So he's a director, right? He's a writer-director guy. Yeah. And so these two guys are like mega Star Wars fan nerd people. And Filoni actually was trained by Lucas himself. So he knows Star Wars back and forth. Okay. So they're sort of given, you guys, we're over here making the movies. You two go work on Star Wars TV. See what you can do over there. All right. So they're coming up with this big plan, essentially, of how what's the Mandalorian, what it's going to be. Well, we need to bring in Boba Fett at some point. Let's save him for like season 2. Let's just focus on Mando and whatever he's doing in season 1. Let's bring him in season 2. And then in season 3, we could have, I assume this is what happened. They're writing it and they're realizing, oh my gosh, so much of season 3 is about Boba Fett and not so much Mandalorian. This is kind of weird that we're just going to like not show the Mandalorian for several episodes. And so they're like, let's do like a mini season in between these seasons and call it Book of Boba Fett. So what I think we're going to get here, and I haven't seen the last episode yet. We're recording this on the day of the last episode coming out. What I think is going to happen is Mandalorian season 3 is going to have a bunch of Boba Fett in it. Just as Book of Boba Fett has a bunch of Mandalorian in it, and that these two things are kind of really intertwined, right? So that's where I'm at there. Also, I know I've really warmed up to this show. At first, I was kind of critical of Book of Boba Fett, but it's very layered. It's very deep and symbolic,
Boring.
and I love it. I love where they're taking Boba Fett.
Okay, my take on it, since we're predicting stuff, is they had the first 4 episodes come out. The reviews were terrible. People were turning it off, and they went to their more known properties by using Grogu and Baby Yoda and Mandalorian.
I don't think Lucasfilm is that nimble. I don't think so.
Just saying. People are turning off. You get pretty nimble.
Who saw Bill Burr as an actor on there?
They're really bringing in some, and then Amy Sedaris is like the mechanic lady. It's a lot of fun. But
Bill
the thing
Burr
I love
has been
about,
in a few things. He's good.
Yeah, and I love him as a comic, but I just didn't see him. I'm like, what? What's Bill Burr doing in there?
the thing I love about Book of Boba Fett is everything that happens in it has something to do with his, like, everything that happened is symbolic of his journey as a essentially a boy bred to be a warrior, who then becomes a warrior, who really has no free agency in his life, who now is becoming a leader, who's taking charge and control of his life, and essentially one by one stripping himself away of all these things that he's sort of built up and added to his life. I think his armor being symbolic of that. So in that first episode, you have 3 Tusken Raiders that he deals with: a child, a warrior, and the leader of the clan. And they all represent different aspects in Boba Fett's life. Him as the child, the clone born to Jango. Him as the warrior, and then what he wants to be, the leader, someone who has essentially ownership of their life and more control in their life. So there's some cool stuff happening there. Some nice subtext. It's a good show.
Well, we're going to continue on. It's led by Lily is taking the reins. I made her go through The Office, so now she's making me go through a bunch of Disney stuff. So,
oh, okay, that's why you're watching it. Good.
Trying to be a good husband. All right,
you guys, if you're gonna talk Star Wars, I'm gonna talk Star Wars, and now you know. Now you know.
All you people on YouTube, I want people ragging on you for telling these irrelevant stories, just like they rag on me.
These irrelevant stories.
Listen, if you want a good YouTube channel to watch to like supplement your Star Wars viewing, go watch Star Wars Explained. And that's what really like opened me up to like understanding Book of Boba Fett better, especially like the 3 Tusken Raider characters and stuff. Really good stuff there. Anyways,